Welcome to CFO 4.0, the future of finance.
Welcome to this episode of CFO 4.0. So, we had some brilliant feedback on our last episode about finding the right CFO role for you, doing some pieces about recruiting into CFO role. And actually, I've got a really interesting guest for you guys today. So I've got Billy Scanlan. So, Billy's actually come from a slightly different industry and has been in role for, I think it's about 8 months now. So I'm going to let him introduce himself, but welcome, Billy. Brilliant to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here, Anna.
So tell us a little bit about the organisation that you're currently working for and what they do.
Yeah, cool. So I've been at the marketing practice for 8 months now. They're a B2B marketing agency focused on the tech industry specifically. So lots of our clients are those big household names, blue chips like Microsoft, ServiceNow, O2, Telefonica, that kind of stuff. And we provide sort of end-to-end solutions from them, from brand awareness through to demand generation, through to kind of targeted ABM campaigns, so right the way through that whole marketing funnel. It's a super exciting business, very fast growth. They're backed by Horizon Capital, who invested in March last year, which is part of the reason for me joining in July time. And we're on a really sort of fast growth buy and build journey over the next few years.
Sounds like a very exciting business to join. So before we get into sort of why you decided to join and that, tell us a little bit about where you came from. What was your background before the marketing practice?
Yeah, so I've had a bit of I suppose a varied career. I've jumped around a few different bits and always taken roles that I've really loved doing, to be honest. I started out my career in accountancy training in forensic accounting. So I worked for FTI Consulting for a while in their economic and litigation consulting team, which is quite a different niche space, but amazing place to be in. So it was a bit too niche for me and learned loads and went to work for a big corporate. So I went to work for AS Watson, who are the retail arm of CK Hutchison Holdings. So they own Superdrug Savers, the perfume shop in the UK. So big, massive retail business, and went all around Europe supporting their regional businesses for 3-4 years, which was an amazing experience. And yeah, decided that was slightly too big, and we went into small businesses after that. So joined a B2B energy switching business and then a digital communications business. Helped both of those grow super fast. Take on some private equity investment as a number two within the finance teams in both of those. Decided it was time to step out and become a number one, which is what I'm doing now.
So what attracted you to joining the marketing practice? What was it about the role that that really made you feel like that would be a good first one for you?
So for me, I think the interesting thing from my background and what I've done the last two roles is a little bit of situational experience. So the last two jobs I've had have been growing companies that are kind of 2-3 million EBITDA level and taking them up into double digit and beyond, and then helping them through an exit process. So I was trying to find another company that was on that journey, where I could sort of apply that situational knowledge and learning into a first CFO role. And that's very much what's happening here, and what the guys really liked within that is that background. And I'd also had some slightly complementary industry experience. So the last business I was at, Investus Digital, does a little bit of kind of SEO paid media work, which sits into some of the demand generation work we do now, a little bit of creative as well. So actually some of those transferable skills and a little bit of industry knowledge was enough to get me in the door and talk my way into a job that actually sounds like I knew what I was doing, knew everything about it, and actually had done it all before and could apply the same thing here, and I picked up the battle scars along the way.
No, absolutely. Because I think the trend is, isn't there, that you work your way up to CFO within a company and then shifts in that, and then shift into that role, or it's very industry specific. So, tell us a little bit about what you think you did that actually set you up for success to shift not only slightly cross industry, even though you had some background, but actually across into a different company into that CFO role.
I think taking the time to get to know the company super important. I think when you get into a stage of finding something you like and a role you like is really key from that, and actually being able to understand it and talk about it in a way that is exciting, and know that you understand what they do, what they want, and what their kind of aims and expectations are within it. For me as well, coming into the process and then being credible as a CFO was really important. So actually having people that I could call on, and for this role, I probably had 3 personal references where the guys at Horizon and the guys at TMP were calling up previous C-suite members that I'd worked with or previous backers and investors and saying, okay, is this guy good? Can get the house in order? Can he give that strategic finance support that we need? Is he ready to step up and take that next sort of spot within that CFO world? Which, fortunately, they were happy to do so. So I think that was a big part of it as well.
So I guess there's a bit of preparation that people need to go through before they actually make that shift. It's not just about finding the right role, it's about being ready for it. So what do you think, at what point did you realize that you're ready for that shift and that it was the next step?
It's a good question. I think I've sort of wanted to do it since I started it. So Make It Cheaper was the first one of these businesses I sort of helped grow through it, and I wanted to do it from there. And I sat down after Make It Cheaper sold to ECI, who are a private equity business, and I sat down with the partner there and asked him, what does a good CFO look like in this space? What does it take to get there? And how do I tick off those skill sets that you're looking for as an investor to get across the line? And he gave me a list, and I hadn't ticked them all off. So I went away again and then worked through what I needed to do to get there and within investors to take it up to that next standard. And yeah, a little bit of it is just that about understanding these are the 2, 3 things that I'm missing from my repertoire for me around M&A experience where I hadn't really done any of that. So we did a bit of that in Investus, a bit of international experience where I hadn't really done anything around that. It was predominantly UK focused. So actually getting that knowledge and that skill set that would help me prove out those extra few proof points along the way was really important. So that's sort of what I did in that bit. And then I felt like, I'd gone through this kind of growth process with a couple of businesses. I'd helped both of them exit. I'd kind of seen that a couple of times and now felt, this is the time to do it. I learned enough. And if, for some people being a sort of career sort of number 2 in finance is exactly what they want to do. But for me, that's not what I wanted to get to. I wanted to be a number 1. You've got to take that plunge. And if I didn't do it then, I never would have done. So.
Yeah, no, it's great. So tell us, obviously you mentioned international experience. Did you gain that in the role that you were currently in at that time, or did you actively look for your next step that involved those elements?
I was actively looking for that type of thing, but I got a little bit lucky in that sense. So the way I got into Investis, and it's the way a lot of things happen, I suppose, in especially the private equity world where people know each other, is ECI actually backed Investis as well, and the same partner at the PE house was on both boards, and I knew that they were looking for another senior finance person in their team, so I reached out and they put me in touch and recommended me through that process as well. So actually, while I wasn't particularly looking for them and didn't target it, it fell really nicely into what I was looking for to kind of round my skill set off.
Yeah, and it's having someone that you could shoulder tap and help verify your existing capabilities was really useful. No, absolutely. So you mentioned a list. So he gave you a list of the things. What were the things on that list? Can you share any of them with us?
The first thing he said, actually, and it's something that sticks with me now, is that you've got to get your house in order. So actually, as a finance investor, your numbers have to add up. It's got to stack up. The business has got to be robust, and you've got to be good at flagging things coming down the road. So kind of practicing a culture of having almost no surprises in the business that, if you're off your numbers or something's happening, either good or bad, that your investors know about it and that they can take the time to digest it and say, okay, there's something going on here, but here are the 3 or 4 things we're doing as a business to course correct or to kind of change that path. So getting the numbers right, key to anything else, and just being clear on what the variances can be in the future is really helpful. And outside of that, it really becomes about strategic support to the finance team. So can you show these projects that you've delivered on to actually add value across the business, and that you are a true partner to a CEO or to a C-suite kind of member to help them grow a business is really important.
No, and both really, really good suggestions in terms of that. So I guess one of the challenges is that partner to the CEO piece. So how did you think about that as and how you would evidence that if somebody asked you about it? What was your thought pattern around it?
A little bit of it is what you can get involved in, and as a CFO now, I encourage my team to do the same thing, that if you want to be involved in that conversation, come to me and say, hey, I want to run a project, here's my time, here's my interest, and I want to take over this area to actually partner with any senior member of the business to help drive that and deliver value. So a little bit of it is having the guts and the ability to go to your own boss and say, hey, this is the thing I want to do, and will you support me on that journey? I think that's the only way to get there really, is to go and ask for it and create time and space in your diary to actually deliver on that. And you'll find that, well, certainly I'm at that, and every CFO that I've had has been the same way, that, if you go to them and say, I want to do this thing that adds value in the business and helps me partner with somebody at that level, they will jump on it, because in the day it makes them look good and makes the business work. So it's great.
Absolutely. And talking of sort of your previous CFOs, how open were you with them about your ambitions? Like, did you actually talk to them about it?
Yeah, I talked to them about it in different ways, and kind of going through that journey, I think they all knew that that's where I would go. I think the CFO at Investis, when I handed in my resignation, very much knew it was coming and knew I was going to do this, but was surprised just how quickly I managed to find a job in the grand scheme of things. But I think if you don't have those conversations, people can't help you on your journey. So I encourage everyone to be really open about it and say, even if it's not in the business that you're in, then being clear, because I found, as a finance community, everyone wants to help people on that trajectory and that career path. So if you're honest and open about it, people will support you on that journey to get the best out of you. And at the end of the day, we're a small profession, so your name will come back at some point in the future for having helped people along that path.
Absolutely, and a whole pay. I find that a lot in finance. There's a lot of pay it forwards. People are very open to willing to have conversations. To see it on the podcast, I speak to a lot of CFOs that want to coach and support their existing team and help them on their journey as well. So I guess that's it's slightly unique in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah, it totally is. And that's something I would say I'm very happy to help. And in my team and anyone in the wider community, if anyone listens to this and wants to reach out and just have a chat about how they might get there and how I can sort of lend any other guidance and support, I'm very happy to do that.
That's a brilliant offer. I'm sure some of our listeners might actually take you up on that one, Billy. So be careful what you offer. Um, so in terms of as you went through your journey, especially in your last couple of roles, did you have any mentors or anyone that you ran things past? Was that something that you took advantage of, whether that's a peer mentor or a senior person?
Yeah, I tend to not had so many formal mentors in the same way, but I either used the CFOs in the businesses that I've been in, or the private equity investors, just to have conversations about actually where do I need to get to. I want to bounce this idea off you within that. I've also been quite lucky in the sense that I play rugby for a rugby club in London, or used to before I got too old, called King's College Hospital Rugby Club, and this will be a shameless plug for them as well, which is full of very talented individuals across all sorts of professions and different markets and different areas. And actually, that's given me quite a nice network to just have good conversations with people in other industries, where you get stuck on something that is particularly technical or in a particular space, where you can just reach out and have good conversations with smart people who can sort of steer you in the right direction.
No, that's a really good shout in terms of making the most of your informal networks, as well as obviously your professional ones as well. So what do you think it was that actually helped you step up in terms of make that shift, especially into a different organization? Talk if anyone was looking to do that, what would be your recommendations and ways to approach?
I think having the guts to do it and the belief to do it is genuinely the first thing to do it. I was surprised actually when I went out, and I had a bit of a scattergun approach to my job hunting in a lot of ways, and went and asked for a lot of recruiters and a lot of different people if they had roles around, and was surprised at how many of them genuinely thought, this is a great CV to put in front of people to step up. So if you believe in yourself and believe in your skill set and ability and say, I want to do this, people will put you out there and you will be credible within yourself. And that's half the battle, actually, is getting yourself in the door and having that conversation. I think then when you get into a stage where you can plan for interview and you can think about what it is, but a lot of it is recalling that situation and experience, those times where you've done those things in the past as a number two in a finance team or doing a slightly different role. And actually, if you can bring that to the fore in any conversation, then people can see that that's gets you over the line. I think probably finding the right business is really important. And I've got really lucky with the marketing practice, where we are a young, dynamic management team. Our CEO's in his early 30s. I'm in my mid 30s. The rest of the board are probably early 40s. So actually, we've got a group here kind of on a great journey together. So a lot of it is finding and partnering in the right place where you can feel like you're all a team of equals and support each other to grow as a team on a board as well.
Yeah, that's also a really good shout, isn't it? The cultural fit, because I guess going into a more structured and less dynamic business wouldn't have suited the skill set that you have as well.
No, it definitely wouldn't have done, and that cultural fit was really important. I think there's probably two bits when you come into a business: how you interact with the wider company and how you fit as a person. So I quite often get told I'm very softly spoken as a CFO, and actually that wouldn't work in some businesses because it, wouldn't dominate the room in the way I need to, but works really well here, which is a really consultative, open approach to a business space. And the other bit about it, I think, is you really need to get to know the business. So at the end of the day, you are the senior finance professional in the business. You need to know everything inside out, know where the bodies are buried, have gone through your diligence on the way in. So actually, you've gone through the stats, you understand them. Here Horizon had just invested in the business a few months before, so I was able to reach out to them and say, okay, can I see the FDD reports, the CDD reports, legal DD reports? What does that tell me about the business that I can then use to shape my thoughts about how I need to behave within the company and how I can get the best out of my first sort of 6 months here?
And how much due diligence, because obviously you mentioned, it sounds like you did quite a bit before you actually either accepted or once as soon as you took on the role. How much did you actually do before you decided on the marketing practice?
A lot in that sense, actually. So I did all of that. So I'd read all the diligence reports in advance, gone through the stats in advance. I'd spoken to everybody that I knew that might know about Horizon or might know about the marketing practice to kind of dig through all of that and understand, okay, is this business credible? What's their journey like? Who are the people involved? What are the investors like? Do people buy businesses that Horizon have backed? All that kind of stuff to understand like how that overall shape of the company and the growth and the trajectory could work. And so far, it's totally paid off. This business is on an amazing journey, super fast growth. We've done 3 acquisitions in the last 7 months. It's on an amazing journey. So definitely worth putting the time and effort in to get the right place. And I had 2 offers on the table when I took this one, and I sort of weighed them up and decided that this was definitely the one for me from that perspective.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I won't ask obviously for the name of the business, but for those both the business, did you approach the other one in a different way in terms of finding that role? Because to actually not only have one role that's from an FC to into that CFO role, but to have two on the table, that's a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of, as I say, you've got to back yourself to get there, right? And just ask the right recruiters, and people happen to have the right jobs from the right openings. But I approached it in exactly the same way. And to be honest, the other one I knew less about was an industry, and so it was an FX broker predominantly, but they also did a lot of white labeling of work for mid-tier banks. So it was quite an interesting space, and they were quite disruptive in the market. So it could have been quite an interesting fit, but I didn't really know it as much. It was a regulated industry, so it was a bit more out of my comfort zone. But for those guys, I still went in, still did all the diligence work. I actually mystery shopped them just to see what they were like as a house. So kind of all that sort of thing where, you've got to live and breathe this business and you've got to be an advocate for it. So you've got to get in and understand exactly what they do and how they do it in every way possible.
No, absolutely. Some brilliant advice. And for anyone out there that is looking for a new CFO role, whether whether it's your first one or not, I think there's some great ideas. So if what was your due diligence checklist? What sorts of things did you look into? You obviously mentioned the buyout reports and the investment reports. What else did you look at?
So I looked at the statutory accounts. They're a bit, they're always a bit out of date, so you take them with a pinch of salt, but you can start to get a steer for, say, which areas in the balance sheet are big. For example, do they have a lot of accrued income, deferred income? What does that look like? What are the growth rates like? Where are they? What stage are they at in their life cycle? What has year-on-year growth really been like? So a lot of that was just, you can go and do a lot of digging around the numbers and get to it. I also found that just talking to people really helps. So trying to understand an industry, go and pick your brains, pick your LinkedIn network, find someone else that's doing a similar thing and just reach out and ask daft questions about what does that industry do? Who are these guys? What are they known for? Is that a really interesting space or not? And get a feel for what's in it from a kind of business perspective. And then if you can get your hands on diligence reports are great, right? If any exist, or a kind of any business plans or any understanding of it, because you can see the growth trajectory, you can see what they're backing and why, and whether or not that's really sustainable, or whether you can add value within that as a finance professional. So like the good thing I found with the Martin practice, it was, reading that, it was owner managed. It needed some scaling up and sorting out with some of the finance teams and just professionalizing a little bit within that. And that was really easy to see quickly and know that I could add value super fast and say, okay, here's 3 things that I can do in the first few months in role to actually improve this business and help it on that journey.
No, absolutely. And all great suggestions. I think sometimes when people go into new roles, they underestimate the effort that they need to and the questions that they need to ask on the other side as well. So some brilliant suggestions for our listeners. So obviously you got into role. What did your first 90-day plan look like? Did you have a plan going in, or was it very much I'm just going to get in and see where the land lies?
Yeah, so I had a plan going in, and one of my interview steps was to go through what that first 90-day plan would be, so people understood it and could really see what I was going to do. For me, a lot of the first bit of the business is listening and understanding. I think there's a temptation to rush in and change the world on day one, and that's not always the right decision. Sometimes it needs to happen. But for me, it was absorbing, changing things where I could see, obvious gaps and quick wins within it. So but a lot of it is just listening, understanding, working out where we needed to go and where we need to take the business, and then making those changes, new board packs, new reporting setups, new kind of compliance structures. And, my first 90 days actually was more difficult than I would have expected, because we did 2 bolt-on acquisitions in the first 90 days, which trebled the size of the business. So what I was coming into is very different from that plan. So one of the big things you can have is you can set this 90-day plan out and think, "Do you know what, this is what I want to do," but the cards you're dealt can be completely different. And I was lucky enough that it was all improvements. You might be dealt cards that show there's a big problem there, you need to sort it out. But for me, it was all kind of upside from that perspective. I think what's really important though is you set your stall out and you set your values out, you set your core things out that you want to be known for as a leader within the business, and actually hitting them home. So for me, it's about being accurate in my numbers, being timely, and adding value within it. And then building that culture, a bit like the PE guy said at the start, that your house is in order and you're not delivering any surprises. So actually, when you get that right and you set that out, that sets you up credibly for the future journey, whatever it looks like.
Absolutely. That again, a challenging first 90 days with 2 acquisitions. So tell me a little bit about, obviously you said that when you first came in, you wanted to get the lay of the land, you wanted to figure out what was happening. How did you approach that? What did you do?
So TMP is good at setting up your first couple of weeks for you anyway as a business. They've got a great onboarding program where they buddy you up with someone to ask all those daft questions that you don't feel confident in asking. But for me, it was just sitting down, meeting with people, chatting to them, understanding what they did, how they did it, what they got from the finance team at the moment, what the gaps were within that, where they thought the areas of the business were that we could really improve, and kind of building up that gets a good picture for the overall business environment. It kind of helps you understand customer journey, what we do, how we sell it, what that looks like, how we deliver it as a business, and kind of working through that whole process. And that was really from almost top to bottom. You have those conversations with the chairman, the CEO, the rest of the board, all the way down to kind of whoever you can find at the coffee machine to have a chat about, kind of all those things.
Brilliant. And in terms of how did you approach it with your team? Did you come into an established finance team, or did you have a few new members? What was the setup when you got in?
So when I joined, so the existing CFO of the Martin practice is still in the business. She's actually moved role to be an FP&A director within the team now and doing a great job there. So we had a reasonably established team from a few perspectives, but it needed strengthening and developing and improving across the board, just because it's a finance team in an owner managed business is very different to a finance team in a private equity business. What's expected of them and the amount of insight and improvement is a different sort of level. So there's a lot of great people in the business, and taking them on that journey is really exciting for me and helping them develop through that. So yeah, it's a lot to do. The other thing that we got with it is we obviously bought two other businesses and inherited two other finance teams. So we're now in the process of trying to align everybody and get everyone playing to their real skill sets and understanding exactly what everyone wants to do, where they are in their career journeys, and actually helping them develop and grow through that process. So we've got some great people, found a few more great ones, and I think, within any finance team, there's always a gap for that next amazing person as well. So again, if anyone is in the market for a finance role and wants to reach out and thinks that they are wherever they do and want to do it here, very welcome to.
Brilliant. Do you have any particular roles in mind? You might as well do a shout out if you're looking for them.
I think we'd be open to anything at any level. It's always good to have good conversations. And even if it doesn't work out now, there's always times in the future to know good people.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever a bad time to have somebody good reaching out to you, to express an interest, to be very fair. And they tend to be the best candidates as well. If we get a lot of that, people touching base and going, when you have a role, we'd be interested in a conversation. And that's a great place to be.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about obviously your first 90 days. Was looking back on it, was there anything that you wished you'd done differently?
Yeah, I'd take a 2-week holiday before it started, probably.
Did you go straight into it, or was there a gap in between?
Straight into it. So I had Friday off and then started on the Monday basically. Yeah, no, I don't think it's any different. I don't think there is really anything I would do materially differently. I've learned a lot along the way, and I've got very lucky through all of it. I think it's been very full on. There's been lots of work to do, lots to prioritize, and a lot of that has been jumping from one thing to the other and making sure we land it. But I think I've been very lucky in the businesses I've found, the people that are here, and the people that are around and supporting me through it. So, very lucky in that respect. So I think it's been a good first 8 months or so. It's been great.
Awesome. And then I guess one of the things is obviously you came in your first 90 days, assessed and figured out where the challenges are. Talk us through how you prioritize what to look at. What was the logic that you used to figure out where to focus?
Yeah, so I think there's always, when you start to divide it up, there's lots of different areas when you can work through it. So I end up dividing it into, okay, what's a core finance thing that we can do and do that quite quickly? What's a kind of more medium term aim, and what's a real mindset shift where it takes longer to do and we may take a little while to get on that trajectory? So it's kind of dividing it up there through, and I tend to use, for prioritization in general, an Eisenhower matrix, which is a really basic tool, but I find really helpful when there's so much going on in your head and in the business, to just prioritize. And it's 2 axes: it's important and urgent. So if things are in the top right and they're important and urgent, you do them, and do them very quickly. Down to the other end where they're not important and they're not urgent, then you don't do them, or you delegate them away, or you leave them until they get to the stage where they're more important and they push up. So for me, it's kind of plotting on that and going, okay, what are the big things, the meetings we need to get moving and deliver on now? And here that was changing up the board deck very quickly. So that had to be done and brought up to a level that the private equity guys expected rather than anything else. So we did that very quickly. And then it was focusing on some of the more kind of longer term aims, both in the finance team and in the wider business, about how we did some of our reporting, how some of our kind of margin improvement projects, all the other bits and pieces within the business.
No, and it's a really interesting comment you made there about the shift from owner managed to private equity. So, and I think people sometimes underestimate the requirement on finance when people make that shift in particular. And I know I can normally tell from an initial conversation with the team which way they are, whether they are owner managed or PE backed. So what are some of the shifts and the different requirements that were on that team that you had to then support and mentor through?
So my big thing about, I suppose, with the private equity backers is they want things more quickly than you get away with it in owner managed world, and I've done both sides of it. So you have an extra rigor and expectation that things will be on time, they'll be accurate, and that you'll get good visibility on future looking stuff as well. So all of that changes. And for me as well, they also like to work at kind of a level 1 for most of it in terms of information, but if there's a problem or they have a question, they want you to know the detail of level 5. So you've got to be able to hold both those two conversations of high level sort of strategic mindset, but also tell me about why this number in one of our regions has changed completely, or this thing's completely moved, and be able to have both of those conversations with them. So it's a lot about just understanding really everything in the business.
Absolutely. And how did you help your team adjust to that? Were they aware of that need for that shift, or was that something you actually had to coach them through?
A lot of it has been sort of coaching and understanding and explaining, and some of that's been a lot of it's been doing myself as well, to be honest. So setting up some things that help them and templates and support that help them get to that level of understanding. But it's been a journey for all of them, and they're getting there really fast. So I've been super impressed with the team across all of them.
Oh, amazing! It's all I don't. I never underestimate the power of a good team. Having A players to start with does make life a lot easier. To be very fair. So what's your plans for the future? Like, what's on the roadmap? So you're 8 months in now. So How are you looking forwards?
Yeah, I mean, so we've got a lot of growth ahead of us. Yeah, had an amazing year last year. We just bought a business in the US a couple of weeks ago that closed. We'll do more acquisitions on this journey, and it's now about integrating those and creating one amazing business, which we're well on the way to doing. So making sure all of that happens. We've got a new ERP system landing later this year as well. So all of these changes kind of help and push the business along the right way. So for me, it's about making ourselves a scalable platform that we can sort of bolt on other acquisitions to and really give business insight, which at the moment we're starting to do, but we're on that journey about how we can provide more insight across the business, really. And then who knows? I mean, Horizon have got as a private equity house, have got a limited time investment they look to do. So at some stage they'll look to move on, and then we'll have another sort of round of investment, and away we go. So I've got that to look forward to as
Hey,
well.
there's loads in there for you to play with. An exciting 18 months for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, in terms of acquisitions, because that's one of the things I think would be quite interesting just to dig into. Obviously, you came in at a point where you'd done two in quite short succession. Tell us a little bit about how you brought those teams on board and how you approach the integration of those teams with your existing finance function.
Yeah, so we're still going through that process at the moment of actually bringing everyone together, and partly that's system time more than anything else. We're actually moving people across systems takes a bit longer than you might otherwise do. For me, I've been in quite a lucky space, I suppose, where we're acquiring businesses that do very different things, and actually bringing them all together is quite good. So a lot of it for now, and for me, is sitting down with everybody in the finance team and saying, okay, what's your journey? Where are you on your sort of finance career path? Where do you want to get to? What do you do now? What do you want to put down? What do you want to pick up? What can I teach you? What can the business teach you? And trying to plug people into the things that they love doing. And actually that helps to create a finance structure quite quickly where people love what they do, are doing the things they're excited about, and are doing the things that grow the business in the right way. So we're moving towards that process. It's starting on a real journey through it, and we're getting there, which is quite exciting. So you can see people get quite excited about other bits and pieces within the business that they wouldn't have had exposure to in the past that now really work.
Absolutely. And in terms of sort of the culture piece, how did you, obviously the marketing practice has its own culture and the acquisitions that you're working with will also have their own. How did you approach that sort of divide? How did you bring them into the marketing practice conversation?
So one of the ways we buy businesses, and we look at growth first and foremost and complementary services and strategic fit, but one of the other big things on our acquisition list is cultural fit. We're predominantly a people business in what we do for a lot of things. So actually finding businesses that are similar to ours in culture is definitely part of that too. So we're very focused on that. And that's true of the finance team as much as the wider business. So people in the team have the same mindset, the same desires, same growth, and the same openness that, again, you don't necessarily always get. So that's, helped by finding the right people almost in some ways. I think bringing them together has been I brought them together in person, which was amazing. You couldn't do that for the last couple of years. So about a month ago, we got all the finance team together in the UK office and had a day of kind of understanding what our vision is as a team, what our values are, what do we want to be known for, what are our big goals for the year, and how do we get there. So actually being able to bring them together and do that was amazing. And we would have done it remotely if we couldn't do it in person. There were a few people who couldn't because we've got part of our team in Australia and part of our team in the US. So actually, for those guys joining remotely as well, just building those conversations and building those relationships is the big thing. Making it, everyone understand that we are one team and that everybody gets to know each other and understand what everybody does, so that they can reach out and have those good conversations and just build. relationships with each other.
Yeah, I do think there is a piece about particularly with global teams, it's so much harder to bring people together, but it can be done, and it sounds like you guys have definitely moved forwards with that. So for anyone that is either going global or looking to do a sort of a global acquisition, what are your top tips for them in terms of bringing that cultural piece together?
Getting time is the hard part, right? Almost, and being aware and conscious of other people's day, and not taking the mickey too much. Quite honest. That for our guys in Australia who's 11 hours time difference, if I ask them to do calls in the evening, being clear that it's not something I want them to do. So actually, I'll get up early myself to do it, or I'll kind of stay late and deal with the US guys in the evening, just so I manage my own time in my diary to fit around some of their schedules to make sure that they feel supported and that I'm not asking too much of them. And including them in everything, I think that's the big thing. So, if you can include them in meetings, great. If you can't include them in meetings, we run a lot of Trello boards here. So actually on that, I've used it, but it's kind of lets you put lots of tasks and to-do lists and checklists up on it and everything like that. And for us, that helps people see goals across the business and see kind of where they're adding value and what the team's doing, and actually move things across and move things along without necessarily having to speak to people all the time to understand that. So it's trying to be really conscious and clear and inclusive within that space, and making sure that they are valued and they are included in your decision making process, and know what's going on in the wider team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it was one of the podcasts I did last year. We had a conversation about remote working and the importance of sort of on demand, like the pull of information versus the push. And I think in the typical sort of, pre-COVID piece, it was very much about a push. You emailed whenever you were ready, and actually creating different ways to communicate where people can pull down at a point that works for them when they're ready is really, really important, and obviously globally as well. So with global teams, that's just as important. So yeah, no, it was an interesting conversation. I might, for anyone that's interested, I'll pop that link in the show notes, and we'll add that in. So unfortunately we are out of time, but thank you so much, Billy. That was a fascinating chat, obviously, into both your experience of finding that brilliant and obviously very exciting new CFO role, through to global acquisitions and building a great culture. So have you got any last sort of top tips for anyone that is looking to get into that first CFO role that you could share with them as a final thought?
I probably said it all the way through. It's have that belief in yourself and your abilities to get there. You will be the best finance person in that business, and that's true almost anywhere you go in. You are the person that knows the most when you get into that first bit of CFO. So be brave in your decision making, and go for it, and reach out. And as I said at the start, I'd be very happy to talk to anyone either in CFO roles or going for it who's wants to get on that journey.
Absolutely. And for those that do want to, I'll pop Billy's LinkedIn URL in the show notes if anyone wants to check it out. And thank you so much, Billy. And I think that's a great inspiration for those. Don't limit yourself to just growing into a CFO role in your existing company. You can make that shift. You just need to just be a bit more strategic about it. So some amazing tips. Thanks again. It's been a really, really great podcast.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for having me.
So for those of you that enjoy this podcast, obviously don't forget we also are now publishing our podcast on YouTube. And also we have coming up our new latest and greatest financial transformation live sessions. So what I love about this podcast is I get to meet some fantastic guests that are thought leaders in their own space and been through some really unique experiences, whereas our financial transformation live sessions that are starting are very much about getting hands-on with process improvement, implementing technology, and all that great stuff. So if you're interested, please do check it out on our website, www.itasolutions.co.uk/financial transformation live. So thank you again, guys, and we'll see you on the next episode.